Okay, I'm gonna start because we're a little bit late. So welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to have you around for this lunchtime webinar. I know a few people are running to get their lunch. We had a lot of interest for the meeting. Unfortunately, we had to postpone it last week because I was in Florida. Uh, and uh, we were okay, but the internet was just loaded. It was impossible to hold a webinar from the hotel with, shared connections, everybody trying to see if their people were okay. So sorry, it's a bit later. We have people who can't make it today, so it's going to be recorded. But thanks to all of you who can attend. My name is Manon Champagne. I am president and co-founder of Aplustransition. We're experts in managing change adoptions in organization and supporting management teams in the execution of their strategy. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. So why are we here? My co-founder and I started working on our change management framework 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, it was really important to us that change management had a strategic sense to it. To us, change management, there was a strategic significance to change management, which, is not always seen in change management methodologies and what we see in the organization. But from the inceptions, we identified that you first need to provide meaning and direction to change, and that's strategic. Um, you also need to make sure that your organization has the capacity to absorb all the change that you're trying to bring in your organization. And that's also strategic. And so, in short, change management to us is more than deliverables, communications, training materials. It's a lot of supporting the organization and making sure that they're able to cope with everything else that's going on in the organization while trying to introduce change. So 20 years later, we still have that vision. And if we're here today, it's because change management has to become more of a shared responsibility in organizations. It cannot lay on a few people's shoulders in the organization. It needs to be a shared responsibility. So we're going to look into that. Before we start, I know we're a small group, but if it's okay with you, I'd like for you to maybe, if you have questions, put them in the chat and we'll come back to it at the end of the presentation. I'll keep some time to make sure that we have, where there's not many of us, we can have very interesting discussions. And Caroline, who's with me, Caroline Doyle, she's in charge of our growth. She's our VP growth. She'll be keeping an eye on the chat and she'll go through the different questions at the end of the presentation. So let's get started if it's okay with you. And what we'll do is talk about turbulence. So who said turbulence? Well, we'll just look at what typically happens with strategic plans and their executions in a lot of organizations today. So let's get started. Your organization, like it or not, cannot stick to status quo. That's obvious for all kinds of reasons, and every organization has their own reasons. So good ideas are put on the table. We imagine a strategy, we build a plan to execute the strategy, and it goes like this. Number 1, 3, 4, 5. So we plan our projects, we sequence them on a 3-year basis, and that's the plan. Okay. But what really happens? I won't talk to it. I'll let you look at it. When there's a oops, it means it's something that was not expected. A machine blew. There was a hurricane in Florida. Operations are going wild because of life lost or claims or whatever. So there's a oops that happens in the organization. So you'll see a few of them in there. Let's go. So, as you can see, there's a lot of things that have changed, and this timeline has gone from 3 years to 5 years. There's been a lot of changes in the plan. Um, you know, so from a well thought out plan, we ended up creating chaos. We had 10 priorities at the beginning to be delivered in 3 years, and it all made sense. It was perfect. But after 5 years, a few projects were delivered with longer timelines, more efforts, more dollars put into it. Some started, then were stopped, then were postponed, and were started again, and finally abandoned, which means we spent time, effort, and dollars that were wasted, no result, and that created disengagement in the team. Many have been postponed, not sure about the impact on results and benefits realization. They were postponed, but they've been delivered. And after 5 years, many projects are not delivered, are completely forgotten, despite the turmoil that it created in the organization. So we went through this hurricane internally, and we're not sure that we're seeing results at the end of the year, except at the end of the day, except that people are tired, people are disengaged, people are in disbelief that we're really getting somewhere and that we know where we're going and that we're going to make it happen. And we see it so often right now with change happening at the speed of light, many changes happening at the same time. So it is more important than ever to make sure that we look at how people can cope with all that change and how we can help as an organization our people cope with it. So the objectives for today, we're going to look at how we can help you identify what in your culture can be a lever or an obstacle to cope with that level of change. And we'll go through a few examples. You'll understand what I mean. Then we'll help you understand that the journey, the change journey, needs to be a shared responsibility if we want it to work. So to go through the turbulence of change today needs to be everybody's responsibility, not just the manager, not just the change specialist, not just the HR, not just the project. Everybody has a role to play, and will offer solutions to increase your organization's, the individuals in your organization's resilience to change. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's get started. We are going to have a brief introduction about culture because I said turbulence and culture. So we talked about the turbulence, we demonstrated the turbulence. Now let's look at what we mean by culture. Some of you may know that, you all know that a iceberg has a little tip, then a lot of it underwater. Well, what's an organizing? I hate that word in English, sorry. Organizational culture. What is an organizational culture? Well, there are signs and behaviors that we can observe in an organization, such as your work environment, how people dress. Do we have standard hours? Do we need to punch when we come in or out? We have flexible hours. How do we organize work? How are decisions made? What type of leadership do we see? How do we promote people? There are things that we may be written, but we can see, we can observe them, and they're well known. So they're up there and it's visible. The hardest part is what's not visible. So what is under the water? Okay, so what's invisible is things that drive our mindsets. They drive how we do things. Although they may not be written policies, they're not in your employee book. It's what's our culture, what are our values. They're there. So what are our beliefs? What do we believe in? What are our mindsets? What are the long-term the long lasting things that, from our past that is keeping us anchored into our current ways of doing things. What are our values? What are our standards? And by values, I don't mean the ones that are written on the wall or written in an employee book. I mean the real values that we carry. And what are the standards in the organization? What do we accept or don't accept as behaviors? And so let me give you an example. A few years ago, maybe it was before COVID, maybe 7, 8 years ago, we were working in a manufacturing environment, and their major issue was a quality issue, and they had a $100 million loss due to non-quality in the organization. I didn't say $100,000. I did say $100 million. It was over $1 million a year that the loss of quality was costing the organization. But what would you know? You wouldn't see it when you go into the organization. You'd walk in the reception, there's poster everywhere. We value quality, quality first, and the quality slogans everywhere in the reception, in the meeting rooms, even on the shop floors. You would see it everywhere. So why is it costing them $100 million a year? What was not visible to the people outside the organization was that inside the organization was a firefighting culture underneath it. And we rewarded people based on their firefighting abilities. And that's how they were rewarded. So when you want to fix things in a firefighting mode, you don't fix the problem. You put a band-aid on a symptom. You never make sustainable change. So it always comes back. So what's the real culture of that organization? So let's have a look at a couple of examples. What we're seeing is that in organization, your culture can sometimes be a lever for change or an obstacle. And the lever is the wind that will blow and will take you to meet your objectives. And the obstacles are how do we say it? The anchors, the things that will keep you from achieving your objective, from moving forward. So let's look at two different culture traits. And I'd like you to open your chat and just give me an answer to two questions. So let's look at a culture of benevolence. In a benevolent culture, I assume everybody knows what a benevolent culture is. So do you believe it is a lever or an obstacle in an organization to cope with turbulence of perpetual change? Just put your answers into the chat. I'll try to open my chat so I can see it. Is it a lever or an obstacle? If you want to put it in the chat. I don't see the chat. Or nobody's answering. Okay.
No,
so
we have a liver.
basically,
somebody said the liver.
I don't see. Okay, so I don't see what's in the. Okay, I don't see what's in the chat. Okay, so and I'll ask you another question. If we're in a firefighting culture, is it an obstacle or is it a lever? Caroline, can you give me the answers? Because I can't read the chat. The chat, I don't know. I don't see anything in the chat.
So it just some people responded to me. So if all of you can just respond to everyone.
What are the answers, Caroline? I don't want to spend too much time
depend on the personality of most people.
Okay.
What else? Do we have another answer? Oh, we have Sonia who said an obstacle.
An obstacle. Okay, so in fact, any cultural trait can be one or the other. So there's the right way of living your behaviors or your cultural trait, and there's the extremes. So we'll look at what it means. Let's look at, for example, A benevolent culture, I'm sorry, a benevolent culture can be a lever. Why? Because, well, we assist people, we take them by the hand, so we want to listen to them, we want to hear their concerns, we want to communicate with them, we'll manage change, we'll be very hand-holding in the process. But it can also be an obstacle. And why can it be an obstacle? Because, well, it can create some inertia. And I do have clients where we build all this transformation execution. They ask the executive team, are we embarking on that transformation? They all said yes. And then the minute we started, yeah, but we can't do it. People won't be happy. People, that's not why people join the organization. So it creates inertia. It takes our focus away from delivering our transformation. And I see Luc André having a bit of a smile. I guess it's something you know about. It takes us away from focusing on what we're actually trying to deliver, because we don't want to offend people. So that's why we need to build the resilience so that they can take that leap and move on with the transformation with us. So it can be both. What about a firefighting cultural trait? Well, it can mean that we're able to integrate change because we do have quick changes that happen every day. We have velocity in the organization. We are in action, and we're quick to adapt. The problem that it creates on the other end is that it can create more chaos. And why? Because we don't actually solve problems in a sustainable way. We put a band-aid on things, we fix the symptoms, but it keeps on coming back because we didn't actually go to the source and fix the problems. So it creates even more change, and we keep on having this whirlwind, or this, sorry, Sonia, I'll be talking about a hurricane again, but we're having this hurricane of change coming through, and it's just not sustainable. So it's exhausting for people. So as you can see, your culture in some respect can be a lever or can be an obstacle. What we need to focus on is what in your culture is a lever. How can we use it when we build our change management strategies and adoption plan? And what do we know is going to be an obstacle that we will need to work on and manage, and take these obstacles one by one and turn them into levers? What can we do to work on the obstacles so that they become levers? Okay. So now we're going to look at, okay, so what does it take? What does it take to build a culture of resilience in the organization? We need to understand how we can better cope with turbulence. And I'll start yet again with a bold statement, but let's start with the end. So only 1/3 of projects, and I can cite so many papers and reviews in HBR and Gartner and whatnot, only 1/3 of projects are a success. Now, the definition of what success means is one thing, but what they don't always say is why. They talk about why it's a success or a failure or in between in terms of scope, of dollars, and of timelines. What it doesn't always say is that maybe some of the reasons why it's not a success are part of how the project was managed. But a lot of it, and very often, we don't talk about the lack of appropriation. You can have a great solution, but if people don't own it, if they find ways around it, you've spent a lot of money and you're not getting the results. And the reasons may be multiple. It doesn't mean the needs. Maybe the needs were not well assessed, or it arrives too late and the needs have evolved in the meantime, or it's delivered at a very bad time. I'm sorry, Sonia, again, hurricane. If you're in an insurance company, general insurance company, and you're in the claims sector and you've just had a hurricane, Yeah, well, not a good time to introduce change. They're all up there trying to resolve, customer problems, and their focus should be on their operations. Maybe people are not sufficiently involved in the project so that the solutions that are being thought, they're being thought by people who won't live with it, who don't understand how the job is being done in the first place. So we'll deliver something, but it's not going to be user friendly, or it's not going to be meeting the needs of the business. Again, not sufficient involvement. We don't take the time to train and support people because the focus is on delivering at a certain date. And I see it again. And I can't believe in 2024, how many customers still think that, oh, we'll just give them a quick reference guide, or we'll give them an online training and they'll be fine. I have a friend actually who was telling me about 3 weeks ago that his organization introduced SAP. He's an accountant. And he said, are we going to have training? They said, no, you're an accountant. You know how it works. Just find your way into it. He wants to cry and leave the business. I mean, he's been there 15 years. It's completely different. Yes, I'm an accountant, but how do I do my job in the new system? And we still see it in 2024, going on 2025. I've been in that business for 30 years. I'm amazed that we're still having the same issues over and over again. Priorities have changed many times. There are too many changes landed at the same time in the same team, and so on. There's so many other examples. So what are we going to do about it? Well, first, we need to understand that the scope of a change is not the scope of a project. And if we look at a single change, just one single change, what you see as the scope of your project is, a solution has been chosen, a project has been launched. We hire, or we appoint a project manager, and we start our project activities. We deliver. There's a go live. We can have some support post go live, and that's it. That's the end of the project. The team is dismantled and moves on to the next project. And that's often where people say, tick, done, the project's done, and that's it. We move on to other things. But the real change only starts for most people. So the change scope is way bigger. It starts where people say there's an issue, there's a problem, and we need to fix it, or we need to find a solution, or there's a new technological opportunity that can take us somewhere, but we identify the need for change. And between that moment and when we're going to launch a project, it can take 3 weeks, it can take 3 years, but there's a lot of thoughts put in the process of taking the decision to launch a project. 99% of the people in the organization don't know about all that thought project, but you have to let them know why you decided to go on with that project. And when the project is finished, it's finished for 99% of the people that are in the project, but it's only the beginning for 99% of the project that are of the people that are in the organization. So if we want to better manage, now that's only for one project. If we have multiple projects in a year that are landing in your teams, they have to understand where does that project fit in the bigger picture, in the strategy? How is it going to affect me? How am I being supported? But too often, project ends, all the teams are dismantled. Nobody's there to support the end users. They're left. And the result is we don't get the benefits that we were expecting. They'll find ways around, they'll find ways to do their jobs, even if they don't understand how your system works or the new process works. Or if, it's not only about system. I should make sure that, it's not just about system, but there's just too much happening in a portfolio of change. And that's only what's in the PMO or the transformation office list. We know that there is so much more happening in the business, continuous improvements. They're not part of your portfolio, but they do take out some efforts from the people that should be assigned to your projects. So there's a lot of things that are critical. So I was talking about a shared responsibility. Change management cannot lay in a couple or a team or a single change management specialist in your organization, be it a consultant, an internal or external consultant. And I'm not trying to say we're useless. We have a role to play, but everybody has a role to play in the organization. Let's start with the executive. Too often, they'll roll out a strategic plan. They'll say, here's the strategic plan, go and implement it, execute it. We'll make a few follow-up, but they need to provide clarity. Each one of the changes that are being brought should make sense to people, and they're the ones who need to provide clarity. Clarity means, what's the vision? Is it aligned on priorities? Are these priorities known in the organization? Do people understand why we're doing this? And they also need to be the reality check point, not the PMO, because the executive needs to understand why it's a plan, but it won't be the day you put the plan in execution, it's changed. And they need to understand that. They need to understand what makes the plan not work and make it more realistic and make it more dynamic so that we know we can not strain people, disengage people, and deliver. The change makers. What do I mean by change makers? I'm talking about a person, a manager in a field or a VP who decides to start a local project. It's not part of the PMO, it's a local project. So what do? They start it, they don't attach it to any solution, they just, it's resolving issues. But while they do that, they're pulling capacity, human capacity, out of your organization to deliver your strategic projects. So what they do needs to be coherent with the vision. They need to demonstrate the coherence of what they're trying to do. They need to make sure that it's feasible. They need to attach with the rest of the strategy to make sure that we're not pooling resources from a strategic project, that we have the financial means to do it, that the timing will be good, looking at a bigger picture. And they need to make sure that they involve the right people in their change. Too often, and I've been asked to provide training to an organization, to people who are in IT, and they decide, for example, they decided, well, the IT director decided to buy HubSpot because he had a very good sales pitch from someone, decided to buy HubSpot, implemented it. Nobody's using it. Why? He didn't involve anybody. It's not part of the vision. It's a great tool. I'll buy it. But he bought it for a few $1 million. So the organization said, yeah, we have to implement it. Nobody's using it. So it's a waste of money. It's a waste of a lot of people's time. So we need to make sure that it makes sense and that the people who are going to be using it are involved in the decision and are involved in the process, in the project's process and activities, and can give their feedback along the way, not just at the end when we're doing user and acceptance testing for a system and that people go, well, it doesn't work, well, we'll fix it later because we're at the end of the project. Managers have a huge role to play, and we know that middle managers and even frontline managers, they are all over the place. They have so many communications to put through, meetings. They're everywhere in the organization, but they have a crucial role in making all these change happen. And their first responsibility is to understand the change. They cannot support a team if they don't understand what it means to them first and what it will mean for their team. And too often we give them a pack of slides and we say, here, we're implementing that change next week. Good luck. Tell your team that's coming. They don't have time to ask questions. They don't have time to have their own concerns and talk about their own concerns and get answers to their own questions. and we're expecting them to support their team. So they need to make sure that they're aware first of what's going on, what it means to them, ask their questions, make sure they're on board before they try to onboard their team, because their team's not stupid. They're going to, my manager doesn't believe in it. That's not going to happen. He's not going to mind if I don't use it. If I, he's not there, so why would I? So your managers are very, very important. And then your employees, they have to keep an open mind. You have to build an environment where there's psychological safety for them to bring their concerns. They have to be proactive about it and not wait for some consultant to come and ask them if they have any concerns. They have to know that they have a space where they can talk about it with their managers or their peers, and that it's going to be answered. But they have to be proactive. They can't just wait for people to come and ask them questions. And when we go live and when the change is there, if they're having trouble, please give them the right to ask for help. It's not a bad thing to ask for help. It's a good thing, because if they don't and they make mistakes and you figure it out 3 months down the line, you may have created a lot of noise or, negative impacts. And if they're really good, ask them. As a manager, you have the right to ask them to support their teams. It's not all on your shoulders. If you've got champions in your team, use them to help and support your team members who are having a little bit more trouble. So can you see that it's not just a change manager or a change specialist that can do all of that? The change specialist will do the hard work of analyzing what the impacts will be, providing communications, but they will chew up the information for you, but you need to understand it and make it your own. They cannot know. They can tell you, here's what we think the impacts are, but you're the one who know what exactly the impacts will be in your team. And it may be different from one team to another. So let's move on to the key elements of a resilient organization. And we've got 4 C's. The first one is clarity. You want a resilient organization, it needs to be clear to everyone, and not just in a big video show or a big, town hall meeting. Once clarity is every day, everywhere. Why are we doing this? What are we trying to achieve? When are we going to do this? How is it going to happen? How am I going to be involved? And clarify the expectations. What are you expecting from people in the integration of that change? If they don't know, they'll keep on doing what they usually do. Okay. Collaboration. For things to move on, we need to have a more collaborative mindset. We have to have this trust and psychological safety space where people can say what they need to say, where people can not just pull on the blanket, we say in French, but try to just pull everything their way, for their silo, for their VP, for their direction. It needs to be what's good for the organization. How can we have common goals rather than silo goals? And yes, there are a lot of tools that will support collaboration, and you have to pick and choose, but you have to use all the tools that you can to encourage collaboration in the organization. The other one, competencies. We need to develop the competencies of executives, professionals, managers, and employees to build the, to own up to the responsibilities that we just talked about. Capabilities. Capabilities are a few things. And I like the English ways of doing it, because capabilities is not a word in French. We use capacity, but capacity to me is different. So capabilities is a list of things that that you have to master. So you have to understand the scope of your capacities. So your capacities in terms of HR, time, availability, and efforts from the different teams internally. Your financial capacities. So maybe you don't have a lot of time internally to dedicate to a project, and you decide to go for financial capacities, capability or capacity, and you hire consultants. But you'll always need people from inside, because consultants don't know your organization. They don't know how you do business today. They don't know how you do a process today. So you can't just, it's going to be all of it looked at together. And of course, your material capacities as well. You have to have the capability to manage your priorities. Maybe not on a daily basis, but almost. You have to have a dynamic way of looking at your priorities so that you don't create chaos in the organization. You have to have strong project management capabilities and change management capabilities as well if you want to make it happen. So now, when we're almost finished, I just want to give you a, how do we go about it? Okay. So how do we go about it? And we've done it at a few clients' place, but it starts with defining. We have a do it framework for everything, but the first phase is to define. So what's the objective of that phase? The objective of that phase is to understand your culture, your current culture. What are the levers and obstacles to the resilience in your organization? And the other objective is to give ourselves a realistic plan of action. Okay, realistic being the key word here. So what we'll deliver in that phase is a high-level diagnosis, and we'll run a high-level diagnosis. We'll workshop with management so that we can come up with recommendation and a prioritized action plan. And what I mean by you can do that internally. We're just talking about a typical journey. Once we've identified our priorities, we're going to organize ourselves to deliver and execute. So we're going to prepare the team to execute on the action plan and prepare managers to actively play their role, as we mentioned earlier. So we're going to set up the required teams. We're going to analyze the areas with the teams. We're going to analyze the areas for improvement for each one of the priorities. And I'm talking about the cultural change here again. We're going to deliver training, and we're going to organize an implementation plan for each one of the priorities. Now, we're not going to look at 5 priorities. When we talk about culture, if we want sustainable change, we need to focus on 1, 2, or 3, depending on if it's a local issue or if it's an organization-wide one. But if you try to make too many cultural change at the same time, people will focus on one of the things you need to change, but you won't see a big ha-ha. Okay, we've made a difference. Then we'll implement, and then we'll track. So we'll roll out each one of the plans, and we'll provide employee training. And then in the track, we'll just make sure that we'll monitor our key indicators to see that the change is sustained. And then we can review our priorities, choose the next 2 or 3 that we want to address, and set up co-development sessions is really important. So I'm done. At the end, I just wanted to say that we're offering, we have a high-level diagnosis that costs $1,000. It's a quick one, but we do a survey of your organization and the cultural traits in your organization with different representatives in your organization, and then we analyze the results, and we have a meeting to share the results and provide you with a roadmap for cultural change to build your resilience. So that's typically $1,000, but we have a limited time offer for the people who attend the webinar with a $500 off. If you contact Caroline, which I don't know if you can see her, you can even scan on her background and organize a meeting with her that will take you to her calendar. So if you contact us before October 30th, we will give you a $500 discount. You'll receive all the details. You'll receive a copy of the presentation and a copy of the video, because we've recorded the video, so you'll be able to hear it again. So I'm done. I'm gonna zip myself and just let you ask your questions. Anybody wants to start? Anybody? I'm gonna stop sharing so that we can just see everybody. Okay. So were there any questions, Caroline? You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute, Caroline?
Sorry.
Okay.
I know after 4 years, I don't know. We're still doing it. Luc André, Victor, do you have any question or?
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So I guess I've been one of those change makers and kind of always been uncomfortable in on corporate environments because most people don't like to change the status quo. So, and I think I kind of identified at least one of the skills that I need to work on is communication or storytelling, how to convince people to do something. But and I saw in your plan, your do it was more like operational. But I get the feeling that at least from my experiences, it's just the convincing, the buy-in, the get people to buy into a particular idea. That's the tough part. Do you have
You're
any
right,
thoughts on that?
Victor. You're right. Storytelling is very important, but you need to know what story to tell as well. And that's why we're saying that here, and I understand you're saying it looks really operational. We focus on cultural traits to make sure that each and every change can be implemented. So what I'm hearing from you is you need to work on your storytelling, but to work on your storytelling, you need to make sure that you know what the story is from your execs. You know where they want to go, and you know that you can count on them to tell that story.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other question? No?
Luc André, haven't seen you in a while. No questions. It's clear. Okay. I think you
thank
heard
you very
me.
much. It was
You heard me
always a
talk
pleasure
about
to
that a
see
few
you.
times.
I was quiet listening. Thank you.
So you know
Okay.
each other?
Yeah.
And I know Luc by another life.
There you go. There you go.
Good, good. Thank you, Manon. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you very much for attending, and you'll be receiving the materials within 24 to 48 hours. We have to work on the video to cut out people and all that. So you'll be receiving all of it within the next 24, 48 hours. Charm, who's with us again, will be the one working her magic so that you get it in time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.